Jack Youssef.
Yeah.
The legend.
The legend.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Nothing like day drinking.
We're evoking a little bit of summer with our beach chair lager from Gahan.
I think we can use it.
I think we can use it.
Yeah.
So Jack, property tax assessments are coming out today.
They are.
These are very confusing questions that people have for us about property taxes, so we want to pick your brain.
Okay.
Why are they so confusing for people?
I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell you that it is the most confusing part of real estate law, and it's kind of like, I say this like those blurry 3D pictures that when you see the boat, you see it once, you always see it. Mm-hmm. In New Brunswick, that's what property taxes are, and they get really confusing because of three elements. One, how they're calculated. We have a two-tier tax system in New Brunswick. Two, when they're payable, because you have to pay it in May, so a lot of people assume it's from May to May. And three, how they pay it. You can pay it through your bank, pay it directly, pay it monthly. There's a million different ways to do it.
So if I'm buying a house solely for income purposes, how does that affect my property taxes?
If you're buying, it's so transactional that the best thing to do is, depending on what you're going to use it for after you buy it, the best thing to do is just check with your professional, and they'll tell you what both the calculation would be, and they'll tell you if they predict it's going to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm closing on my house.
Yeah.
And property taxes are already paid for the year. What happens?
If the same calculation happens every time. So whether you're buying a house or selling a house, the initial calculation that a lawyer will do will be coming up with what's called a daily rate. So we take the annual taxes of whatever it is for that year, and we'll all know what those amounts are today. Mm-hmm. And we divide it by 365 days, because property taxes don't go from May to May. They go from January 1 to December 31st. So when you adjust, when you're selling your house and it's closing on whatever day, and they're already paid, the buyer is going to pay you, in addition to the purchase price, whatever the daily rate of tax would be from the closing date to December 31st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, do you recommend that I roll my property taxes into my mortgage, or do I pay monthly? What are my options?
You may not have any options, because if you're going, like, for example, the CMHC mortgage, the banks will oftentimes require you to pay it through your bank. Mm-hmm. What happens there is the bank will basically open a savings account for you, separate from your mortgage, and every time you pay monthly, they're putting it into that savings account. So when the tax time comes, they look in the savings account. It's never going to be the exact number, but it'll be close enough that the bank will take what they do have. If it's too much, they'll pay what they have to pay and adjust your monthly mortgage payment to meet the new amount. Mm-hmm. And if it's too little, they'll pay the deficiency normally, and they'll increase your mortgage payment for the next little while to make up for that deficiency.
Okay.
But if you don't have to go through CMHC, you can pay monthly through the province. You can pay annually through the province. Those are your two other options.
Okay. Now, what happens if I buy a house that's tax assessment is much lower than what I pay?
The tax assessments themselves aren't necessarily indicative of a property's value, because property taxes themselves on a provincial level don't get updated as often as they should, because there's only a few assessors for the province. If we, in a perfect world, we'd have assessors checking them every year. So that the assessed value on a property really isn't as relevant to a transaction that you would do as you'd think, because the value is mostly based on what the appraiser is going to say, because that property tax valuation may not have changed for 15 years, mm-hmm. right?
And if they haven't pulled permits for all the work done, then they wouldn't know.
It's unfortunate, the system we have now, because what I've found in my practice over the last 20 years is that people are half the time terrified to get a permit, because mm-hmm. they mistakenly think that it's going to affect a big property tax gain, kind of like you're afraid to call your insurance company because you're afraid you're going to have a big insurance increase as well.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah, fortunately it doesn't work that way.
Can I contest my property tax assessment?
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, if you were part of the flooding damage last year, I'm not saying you should contest it, but you should be definitely taking a hard look at it, and you should be contacting the province if you think it's out of line. Because a lot of people were affected last year, both by the inaccuracy of the system that they implemented at the last minute, and they're trying to adjust that, and the rest of it. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. You can contest it, but you may not want to. It really depends on what you're doing next with the property. But if you really want your property value to line up with the appraised value, then absolutely, you should always appeal.
Okay. And you've already touched on this, but I guess my question in relation to market value and property tax value, often they're not the same. What would be your top three reasons why? The
top three reasons why, the first one I would say luck. If you're really lucky and the province doesn't pick up on the fact that you have more money into your property than you've told them, then you're going to have a lower assessment, but your house will be worth more. So that's just luck that no one noticed. Two is kind of like luck. The market conditions change. If you own a property that's a small little commercial mom and pop shop and Walmart opens up next door, Well, your assessment might say 80,000, but you now might be worth 800,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people that the values on the provincial values isn't something you should go by in your world. You need to go by what the use is, what it'll be after the fact, and what the appraiser and the bank agree if you're getting that financing, what they agree it's worth. Mm-hmm. Because what the province says it's worth will be adjusted over time, but what it's actually worth is only what someone is willing to pay for it. Like everything is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. You
just have the best way of simplifying complex things.
I had to talk to so many people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jack.
You're welcome.
What a privilege, always.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Tune in next week for another Pints with the Pros with the Cyroy Group of Gardner Realty, Royal LePage.